Okay, good evening, everybody. So attendance for this class is not great, but I know that it is assessment time and you've got multiple things due, so I'm just going to record it for you. So just before we get into the learning units that I want to cover, just a quick module update. In terms of your ICE class, please, we have set a date for the 30th of April. That is when I will be extracting the final marks and submitting it for you. So please make sure that you have done at least 4. If you are struggling to complete any of them, please pop me a mail so that I can have a look at them. Assignment 1 marks have been released, and in general terms, they were very good. So I was very happy with the marks for this class. And if you follow the same format and take the feedback into consideration, assignment 2 should be great. Okay, attached to your assignment marks is a rubric, and under each section then tells you how much you scored, as well as comments if you didn't do too well in that question. So just pay attention to that. And then obviously your general things like you got an in-text reference and provide a full reference page, numbering correctly, just those type of things. Okay, so tonight we're going through learning unit 7 and 8. And these 2 chapters form the latter part of the management function process. So you would remember that from previous classes, we covered planning and leading, which made up the first 2 sections of management functions. And now we are going through organizing and leading. Okay, so organizing entails everything that a business does to put things into different departments or different sections so that the business can function correctly. And this involves taking all the resources that they have at hand, and this includes human resources, natural resources, all of these things that we had previously spoke about, and dividing them into certain units that allows the business to function and produce products and services in a cost-efficient way with the required quantity and quality required. It also then allows management to go and identify how certain units are performing and to determine those that are underperforming and where resources need to be sent. Okay, so organizing in its exact term is ensuring that you are able to track your activity within your business and allocate resources to the most profitable unit. Now, there are various ways that one can organize. And it depends on the organization and what they hope to achieve and what they are currently doing. So in terms of businesses who are heavily reliant on functional areas, we have a functional structure that they can follow. If a company like Woolworths has different consumers that they are catering to, so your women's clothes, your men's clothes, your kiddies' clothes, your pets and food, they can then have customer differentiation where they have certain units that are separated according to the types of customers they serve. In a similar fashion, if an organization has various products, they can then split their operations according to the product. So each product type that they offer has their own little division. Okay, and there's also different types of structures for international companies and so on. So in terms of organizing, I've also released slides for you with full voiceover explaining each aspect. So in addition to the various structures that companies can choose, there's also elements that go into organizing to ensure that your human resources are content and stay within your business. Okay, and we covered a little bit of this in assignment 2 when I went over the recording with you. So to keep your customers engaged, you need to ensure that you are utilizing them in the best way. And so I'm going to use a case study to explain these concepts to you. So if you look at the scenario that I have up on the screen, it says Zanele has recently been promoted to a team leader role at KexFix Ltd, a company that repairs small electronics. She supervises a team of technicians responsible for diagnosing, fixing, and testing devices. When she took over, each technician was assigned only to one task. Sipho did diagnostics, Lorato handled repairs, and Ahmed did final testing. Zanele noticed that although each team member was efficient, they were also disengaged. She decided to make some changes. She introduced a system where each team member would rotate tasks weekly, allowing them to gain experience in all three functional areas. Later, she explained their roles to include later she expanded their roles to include basic customer service, such as explaining repair works to clients. Zanele also began assigning team members small decision responsibilities, such as choosing tools or planning their workflow for the day. At the same time, Zanele introduced the structure of the team. She made sure each technician reported only to her and not the senior management head. She currently supervises 8 technicians directly and finds it manageable, but she is wondering that as the team expands, would this stretch her too thin? So in this little scenario, there's various concepts relating to organization that can be tested. So the first one says, what kind of work structure was in place before Zanele introduced changes, and what is this example of? So before Zanele introduced the changes, each technician was doing a specific task, which was repeatedly done, and you could refer to them as specialists. And this type of organization is job specialization. So in this case, an employee learns a certain task, a certain skill, or a certain area, and they repeatedly do those functions, which makes them a specialist. All right, which is great because as people learn to do things, they learn to do it more efficiently. However, sometimes people do tend to get a little bored in them. Okay, so what is the purpose of rotating the tasks among team members, and what concept does this demonstrate? So Zanele rotated tasks to reduce monotony and increase flexibility among the technicians, and this is job rotation. So in certain circumstances, like perhaps a chartered accountant who studied for many years, and that is a skill that they learn, they do the same thing over and over again, and they are specialists in their field. They may enjoy it, okay, or you could add in a little bit of additional tasks, but you can't take them out and put them into IT. Right? They don't understand the concepts. But within the accounting space, if there are 3 accountants, one is in charge of payroll, one is in charge of audits, one is in charge of preparing the financial statements, you can rotate tasks among them. So for this cycle, you do this, this, and this. For the next cycle, we switch it around. So what this does is it's still within their skill set, but the job rotation keeps things exciting and not monotonous, so employees don't tend to get bored. Okay, what concept is illustrated by adding customer service duties to the technician's responsibility? Okay, this is job enlargement. So what is done here is that to prevent your employees being feeling like they've got no authority, feeling like their job is staying the same, you sort of enlarge it, but it's the same skill set. So you're not pushing them above their current skill set. You're not challenging them. You're just providing additional tasks to them. And people do want tasks because when you give somebody an additional task, it shows a sense of trust. Okay, so not above their skill set, within the same level of their skills, you're just giving them additional tasks. When Zanele asked team members to plan their workflow and make minor decisions, what concept was she demonstrating or representing? This is job enrichment. Okay, so job enlargement means the same skill set, you just give additional tasks. With job enrichment, you give employees more responsibility, and so you sort of up their level a little bit. Okay, so you give them some authority, you're putting them in charge of certain things and you are increasing their workflow, but with more responsibility. And with more responsibility, your employees tend to feel like they are appreciated and that you trust them. Okay, so job enlargement is adding additional tasks at the same level. Job enrichment is adding tasks that increase responsibility. Then in terms of authority and reporting, what principle is shown by ensuring the technicians only report to Zanele? So when Zanele said that she does not want the technicians to report to the heads or the managerial functional heads, she's employing the technique of unity of command, which means one person, so one employee must report to only one manager. Okay, there's various reasons for this. If an employee has to report to two different managers, they tend to get confused. They could get conflicting job descriptions, they could get conflicting advice, and ultimately you are confusing your employees. So yes, you could have project managers, but one line manager. What term describes the direct reporting line from technicians to Zanele and from Zanele to senior management? Okay, this is chain of command. So what we are saying here is who reports to who and what does that look like? Okay, so we are not saying that the technicians, their voice can never lead up the ladder or go to senior management, but we are saying you report to Zanele, who reports to senior management, and that is the flow. Okay, so it's the hierarchical structure of an organization. A typical hierarchical structure looks like your CEOs at the top, your middle management, your functional heads, employees, supervisors, lower level managers, which is your supervisors, and employees at the bottom. And then what management concept is Zanele considering when she questions whether she can effectively supervise more than 8 people? Okay, she's talking about span of control. And span of control reflects how many people does one manager have to control or take charge of. And this number varies, okay? Anything too large, the manager cannot effectively run it. Anything too small, and the manager might get a little bit bored or start to micromanage. What is that correct number? It depends on the manager. So a manager that is very skilled and has a lot of experience in managing people can have a larger a larger span of control as compared to a new manager. In contrast to that, if the team that is being managed is skilled and able to work on their own, then that span can be bigger or wider. If that team is not as skilled as they should be, and they require a lot of management, then that span of control must be narrower. If the tasks are they're high value tasks, which means a mistake or a minor mistake can lead to consequences, then a narrow task, a narrow team of people to supervise. So it depends on the nature, the task, the experience of the manager, the experience of the actual group being supervised. Okay, so earlier on when we started, I spoke about the different types of structures that you get and where are they relevant. So I've constructed a little activity for you. These are just 4 of the types. So a functional structure organizes people into departments based on job functions. All right. So typical functional structure means what is your function in the business? Oh, you do marketing, that department. What do you do? Finance, that department. HR, that department. IT. And so you have your CEO at the top and all your functional departments, and then your lower level management below. Another way of management is product structure. And this divides it according to the specific goods that you are making, okay? Like if you had bread or dairy products, meat products, perishables, right? You would then have a structure where you have dairy products, perishables, meat. And each of those structures will have their own units within them. The same with geographical structure. If you are an international or global company and you have branches in different countries, then you will use a geographical structure. So in each country, you have a unit that operates like a business. And then a matrix structure is a little bit more complex. And this is where you have your normal functional structure, but there's an out of ordinary project that comes on. And so what happens here is to lead that project, you have a whole project team and a project manager. So for that duration of the project, employees do have a line manager that they report to, but they also take instructions from the project manager. Once that project is done, that team breaks up and everybody goes back to their original line managers. Okay, so when I previously said that one person must report only to one person, that stays the same, but they almost have like a dotted line to the project manager because the project manager is leading out that project. Okay. And then the last step of the management functional areas is the controlling process. Okay. And the controlling process is at the very end before we go back to planning. And in this step, we look at what we originally wanted to do in the planning process. We look at now what did we actually make and what are we doing, and we compare the both of them. Okay, so initially we had established standards, what we wanted to achieve. We then said, okay, this is what I wanted and this is what I made. So if I wanted to make 500 products, I measure what I've currently done. Okay, I've made 300. I then compare. I've wanted 5, I've got 3, oh, I'm 200 short. And then I take corrective action and I go back to the planning stage and I remake plans and I redecide how I'm going to achieve this. Okay. Not only variances that are negative need intervention. If you planned to make 500, but in actual fact you made 1,500, you then need to evaluate, how did I make so much so far from my planning? Did I utilize, is the product of the quality that I wanted? Maybe I'm underestimating my planning. So you go back to the planning stage. So as simple as that looks, planning is a control is not a very simple concept, okay? We don't only do it at the end or the fourth step or the last thing to think about. It's done continuously. So before we start our manufacturing process, we do something called pre-control. And during pre-control, whatever goes into that manufacturing process must meet a certain quality. So if I want to make a cake, okay, because it's very simple now, I must make sure that all my raw materials that are in that cake is of a standard that I want that cake to end up like. All right, I have to do pre-control to make sure a quality check is done on that. Then when the baker is baking this cake, there must be concurrent control to make sure that the quality and integrity of that raw materials is upheld during the process of it being utilized, which means if all the ingredients were organic ingredients, we cannot now make this in an unsanitary environment. Okay, so simple things like that while the process is continuing to make sure all the correct ingredients go in, that's called concurrent control. And then post control is once we put this cake in the oven and we take it out, we now try to identify, is this of a quality that I am happy to send out to my consumer? If so, I let it go. If I get this cake and it doesn't seem like what I wanted, then do I really want to put my reputation on it? Okay, so as much as we have the 4 functional areas of management, you would see that when we discussed it, they always interchange because in business, one thing doesn't flow from one to the next in the way we learn it. It's always mixed and it happens so fast. And that is why we call it the functions of management, because you've got to do it interchangeably and switch between them. Okay, so we have learning unit 9 and 10, and learning unit 10 is quite intense. So there's 5 topics within learning unit 10, and I have released slides on those, so we will try and cover those a little bit in depth because some of it does involve calculations. So when you're listening to this, just remember that it will be helpful if you bring a calculator to our next session, but I will put up a note for you. Okay, all the very best with your learning. Take care.